Good morning, everyone. My name is Yuki Yamashita, and I'm Figma's Chief Product Officer. And on behalf of the entire Figma team from around the world, welcome to Config 2023. Thank you so much for joining us today. We feel incredibly lucky to be supported by so many of you. This is actually the first time our community has gotten together in person for Config since our very first conference back in 2020. So, to the 8,500 people here in San Francisco, it's so good to see all of you. We also have hundreds of thousands of attendees tuning in virtually. That's right, hundreds of thousands. That's as many active users that were on the platform when I joined Figma a little over 4 years ago, which just boggles my mind. And I want to give a special shout out to the Config watch parties that are happening around the world. There are 55 of them, from places like Chennai to Bogota, from Cincinnati to Singapore, which I was just at last month. So thank you for celebrating this very special day with us. Now, I can't wait to show you what we have in store today, and I'm sure neither can you. So let's kick things off the way we always have by showing you what our team has been building. And for that, please join me in welcoming Figma CEO, Dylan Field.
Thanks, Yuki. Wow. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Config 2023. This is amazing to see everyone here. And just wherever you are, wherever you're coming from, thank you for being here with us. So, as Yuki mentioned, the last in-person config was February 6, 2020, which you might note that date was just a few weeks before COVID started. And we thought that going into that, config would be the biggest event of the year. But of course, the world had some other plans. And it was about 800 people in the Midway, which was in the dog patch in SF. And just to bring you back to that moment, we launched selection colors, hyperlinks, and auto layout with stretch. Some good features. So today, we have over 8,000 people here. Hundreds of thousands tuning in remotely. And we are just completely humbled by all of us being together. So thank you so much for being part of this journey with us. The product, so a lot has changed, especially in the last year. And that's not just the product, it's also the community, if we see everybody here, the company, and the world. But first on the product, let's take a look at some of the highlights of what has shipped. And of course, those are just some highlights. The team has been working super hard to get all sorts of stuff out. Second, though, our community has also grown. And we introduced the ability to publish paid resources most recently. So I want to highlight a few creators. First, Molly. Molly published the UI Prep Style Guide. I see some applause. And Molly also teaches DS Bootcamp, Design Systems Bootcamps, using her Figma UI kits. Div Riots is a team behind HTML2 Design. Maybe some of you are users of this plugin. If you haven't checked it out, please do. It lets you convert a website into Figma. And this is our most purchased plugin. But it's not just individual creators. We also have companies, such as Apple. You might have heard of them. And they published their first official design kits on the Figma community platform. I also want to give a shout out to Joey Banks. I don't know where you are, Joey. Joey, for years, has built and maintained just immaculate kits, and we just appreciate all the work you've done so much, Joey. Another really core part of our community are our students and educators. And we've been invested in education since the beginning of Figma. So all of our products, since we launched Figma in GA in 2016, have been free for students and educators. And we're committed to being free forever for them as well. So last year, Google Chromebooks beta was launched for Figma and FigJam to students. And this was us working with 50 schools and about 10,000 students around the United States. Today, we're announcing the GA of our partnership with Chromebook. And any classroom in the United States will now have access to the highest enterprise grade of Figma. Also new, we're able to now expand to students under 13 in the United States, and we're expanding our education offering to Japan as well. Third, Figma as a company is also going through changes. Back in the fall of last year, we entered into an acquisition agreement with Adobe, and like many of you, I grew up using Adobe tools. So I believe we can do so much more for you with access to Adobe's deep tech and expertise. And I know that our distinct strengths can come together in amazing ways for product design, creativity, and productivity. And I couldn't be more excited. Lastly, the world is shifting too. It's 2023, and so as someone in technology in San Francisco, I can't do this keynote without mentioning AI. I think it's on all of our minds, though, really. How is this going to impact design? AI will redesign how we work. That's clear. And I think that for many of us, that's scary, but also fascinating. My point of view is that AI will enable anyone to get to a good first draft. But a good first draft is not a world-class product. Going from a good first draft to a world-class product still requires all of you, and it still requires your teams. When I think about Figma's efforts, I often draw out 3 stages of the product building process: brainstorming and ideation, design, and building and production. If you can think it, Figma wants to help you build it. But there's still so much more we can improve when it comes to going from design to build. So that's what today's keynote is going to focus on: those late stages of the design process and those earlier stages of the building process. We're going to dive into 3 areas: design systems, prototyping, and production. So let's get started. Oh boy. So a lot of you have speculated online that we're going to launch tokens at Config this year. And I'm so sorry to say, we're not launching tokens. But we are launching variables. Language is pretty important, and I know that many of us have been using the words tokens as a community. and we're not trying to kill the word. We are calling in variables because we are taking a more holistic approach beyond just immutable values in your design system. And so I think as we go through the keynote today, you'll understand why we're calling it variables, not tokens. But let's dive in and just check it out. OK, so here I am. And you can see here that I am in a design. And we're going to be working in this file, which is for a marketplace called World Peas. It has locally sourced fruits and vegetables, apparently from Dillon Fields field. Nice. And if you're like me, when you're modifying these designs, you might want to experiment by putting in different values and changing them. So the first thing I'm going to show you is that now these variables can actually be surfaced as these values. So for example, if I want to change to a larger border radius, I can just do that. You can see there's this little button here, and I can switch. I can also modify my auto layout spacing here as well. So I want to go from small to large. It's trivial. OK, so you're probably wondering, where are these magical variables defined? And if you go to the right-hand side, you can see that if I click this button, I'll open the variables UI. So this variables UI lets you define all sorts of different variables. On the top, we have spacing variables, which are integers. We also have our border radius variables we just use. We also can define string variables, color variables, and even Boolean variables. Now, you might be wondering, though, because many of us have in our minds this link between the word tokens or variables and theming. Where is the theming? So let's go check that out. Now, I'm already in a collection of variables. Oh, sorry, one more thing I want to show you first. If you click here, you can also scope your variables. So for example, for border radius, I can scope it to just show up for corner radius. Or for spacing, I can make it just show up for auto layout, which is really powerful when you're creating a design system and you want to make sure it's consumed a certain way. OK, now if I switch collections to color modes, you can see that my rows are variables and my columns are different modes. And so on the bottom, I've got hex colors defined. And on top, I've got variables that are referenced as an alias. This is also super useful because when you are able to define something one place and use it everywhere, it makes your design system so much more easy to maintain. So you can see we've got a light mode and a dark mode defined here. So let's check out how this shows up. If I click this frame, I can go to my layer properties, and you'll see that I have a little option here. And if I switch to dark mode, it just works. Now, I can actually have more than just two modes. For example, how about we go to config 2023 mode? So as powerful as that is, there's more. And you can define modes that are not just colors and themes, but you can also do it with other types of variables as well. For example, here I have my densities mode. And I've got densities defined as compact. But what if I want to switch it to something that has more space? Now I can click comfortable or spacious. And you'll notice that as I went from spacious, comfortable, those actually, the thumbnails appear and disappear. And so I can also tie spacing to Boolean attributes, like do I want to have an image appear or not. Now let's say that World Peas wants to go global, and we want to start to localize our content more. I can define modes with string variables. So I can go from English to Japanese. And if I want to test out some long strings in German, I can do that too. Now, one thing that we're aware of is that a lot of times you want to combine these modes to test things together. So for example, what if I want to test Japanese, mobile, and dark as a combo? I can just copy this into this frame, and it will all just work automatically. OK, what about German and config? Now, OK, let's try something a little bit harder. What if we went from mobile to tablet and also did English and light? Ready? So, just to recap, we're launching color, number, string, and Boolean variables. We've added collections, aliasing, modes, scoping, and inheritance. If you're on Pro and Org, you'll get 4 modes. Enterprise gets 40 modes, as well as a REST API that you can ping in order to keep design and development in sync. All right, let's get back to the demo. Now, this is a really cool tablet UI that I got just magically just now. But you might notice that these rows are not great. If I go here, you can see that they're pretty long, and I just don't love the way they look. This is an auto layout frame. And it'd be nice if I can kind of make like a max width here as well as a minimum width. And today we're announcing that you can do just that. So if I go in here to my width, you'll see that there's now a little drop-down arrow. I can add my min width. I'll choose 300. And a max width, which I'll make 600. And you can see it's adjusted. So now we have a little bit of a better design. But I personally feel like it looked better if you had them on maybe like 2 per row instead of 1 per row. Anyone agree? OK, cool. So what if, with auto layout, I could just make it wrap? That'd be nice, right? Well, today, we're announcing you can do just that. And check this out. If I design this responsively, it will just flow the way I want it to. All right. So with auto layout improvements today, we're announcing wrap, min width and height, max width and height, and it was a little bit of a long demo, so we truncated it. We're also announcing truncation as well for text. OK, you might think that's a wrap, but don't worry, we got more. Prototyping. Next up, we're going to dive into prototyping. Now, prototyping in Figma, as we all know, is essential because it helps you user test and get the right feedback. But it's way too complex. So complex that sometimes we get screenshots like these. And no, this isn't Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, so that was a great movie. This is a Figma prototype, and it has so many noodles. Internally, we actually have a name for this. We call these pasta pictures. And we collect them in a Slack channel at Figma. And these prototypes can be super impressive, but they're also very scary to maintain. So scary, in fact, that one of our users, Tyler, actually went as a pasta picture for the last Halloween. Now, with all due respect to Tyler, we think there has to be a better way. So we set off on a quest to make prototyping better using variables. Let's go back to the demo and take a look. All right. So I'm going to go to my prototyping file here. And just to orient ourselves, we have really 3 states. The first state for our World Peas app is this product page, where you can see the produce. We have a watermelon, we have pears, and we got some cherries. The second state is a product detail page. If I tap on or click on the watermelon, I should see a watermelon. Pear, pear. Cherry, cherry. The third state is this cart. If the cart has items in it, I should see the cart view that's on the left with whatever items are in my cart. And if it has no items in it, I should see an empty state on the right. So this should be pretty simple to build, right? Well, today in Figma, it's not. You would have to basically imagine all the different permutations of how you go from adding watermelons and pears and cherries, and each time you wanted to make it so you could add one more, it would expand in a kind of combinatorial explosion of possibilities. In addition, the conditional of am I going to see items in the cart or not really makes things hard to see and makes it so that you have even more options at that, in that explosion of possibilities. And we actually, just to show you what that does look like, this is an example of what a prototype looks like if you can just add like a few different items, and it doesn't even work if you try to add more items, because I think we're all used to making these happy paths in our prototype, where the user has to do something in a very specific way, and if they don't, the prototype breaks. And this works, but doesn't get the realistic feedback that we all want and need. So let's see how we can do this better with variables. Now, the first thing I want to show you are the variables that I've defined for this prototype. If I go to my general collection, you'll see the sort of global state for this app. We've got 3 items in our cart, which is reflected here. We have a selected product, watermelon, reflected there. And we've got our total, which is reflected in our cart view here. Now, one thing we can do is we can use modes to basically create almost like a small database for our products. So each row here are our variables, and each column are our products. And we have a product for watermelon, pears, and cherries. And you can almost think of these like objects in programming. So they have properties, like a price, in this case $3.99 for the watermelon, a location, and a count for how many are in your cart. OK, so let's see what it would look like to basically wire this up. So let's say that I want to take this plus button, and when I tap it, I want to add an interaction. So on tap, I'll say I want to set this variable. And I'll set the variable count, which is scoped to the watermelon's object, to count of the watermelon plus 1, because it's incrementing. The second thing we're launching here is that now you can actually add several interactions per trigger. So if I press plus again, it works. I can set another variable. And I can say the total, which is scoped to the global state, is equal to the existing total plus the price of the watermelon. OK, now let's see if this works. So usually what I do is I press this play button. And I'd have to go back and forth between my prototype and the screen. But it's a little bit laborious. It's great when you're presenting information, but it's kind of annoying when you're trying to rapidly iterate and develop a prototype. So what if instead I could do this all in my document? Today we're announcing an inline prototype viewer. And you can move this around, you can resize it. It's pretty awesome. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to my screen that we just made. And you can see that if I press this 4 button, or this plus button, it'll increment to 4, and also my subtotal will update. Another usability improvement we've made is we're announcing now that you can actually start to see these interactions on the canvas. So if I click here, I can actually see right on the canvas what this conditional is. As a reminder, what we're trying to do is make it so that you can go from this cart to either the full cart or the empty state cart. And so I need a conditional to do that. If the quantity in the cart is 0, I should navigate to empty. Otherwise, I should navigate to the basket state. OK, so let's see how it all works together now. I've got my prototype. I can go to pairs. I can add them to the basket. I can go to my cart. And when I'm in the cart, I can decrease what's in the prototype. It'll go to the empty state. I can go back home. Let's see if the conditional works. If I click here, it'll go to the empty state now. This is just scratching the surface of what you can do with prototyping with variables. Honestly, we could have spent the entire keynote just exploring this one feature, and I am so excited about what you can do here. It's really, really fun to play with, so I can't wait for you to take a look. And all advanced prototyping features will be available on all paid plans. We hope this opens the door to all sorts of more prototyping possibilities. And of course, we didn't cover everything today. If we advance the slide. There we go. To deep dive in these features, if you want to see them tomorrow, you can check out our in-person workshops. So variables is going to be at 11:30, and we have a deep dive on prototyping at 12:45 tomorrow. So don't miss those. OK. While this makes it easier to build complex prototypes and model a more realistic user experience, I think you'd all agree that we're not to the finish line until it gets built. So let's go to the next phase, which is development. Now, you can see here that I have my prototype I made as well as the components in this section here. But if I zoom out, I have all these explorations in my file. And that's kind of worrisome, because what if my developer builds the wrong thing? Has anyone ever been there before? It happens at Figma, too. Today, we're announcing a very small feature, tiny little feature, which is if I click my section, I now have a little button. Everyone see it? It says, Mark is ready for dev. If I click this button, I get this little status, ready for dev. Just a little feature. What if I told you that this feature is sort of like a wormhole into a whole new universe of Figma? To explain more, I'm going to welcome Kris Rasmussen, Figma CTO, to the stage. Welcome, Kris. You're going to rock it, man.
Hey everyone, I am so excited to be here today and share something new that we've been working on. I joined Figma in 2016 because I was excited about this team's vision to build a new kind of design tool, one that was built for entire product teams. Now, I know this is important to all of you as well. Many of you are coders too, and regardless of whether or not you code, we all want to see our designs brought to life faster and more accurately. So why is it so hard? Well, there's a lot of different reasons, but at the core of it all is the fact that we're optimizing for very different things when we're developing and when we're designing. When we're designing, we're optimizing for rapid iteration and ideation. Anything that interrupts our flow has the potential to limit our creativity. On the other end of the spectrum, when we're getting closer to production, we have to start being explicit about all those details that were previously implied and easily assumed by our team. We need to think not just about how things are going to look and work, but also how they're going to be maintained, reused, and composed. At Figma, we want our tools to be excellent on either end of this spectrum, not just OK, somewhere in between. So far, we've built Figma for the design end of the spectrum. But we think it's time to focus on the development end as well. Because 30% of our weekly active users at Figma today are already developers. That's the same percent as designers. And yet we haven't really optimized for their needs. Show of hands. How many of you out here are developers today? Yeah, that's great. Definitely not 30%, though. It's OK. We expected that. Because the reality is, developers don't really feel at home in Figma. And it's pretty easy to see why. This is what a typical Figma file looks like. And this is a really pretty version made by our brand design team. Screens upon screens spread across dozens of different pages. No clear indication of what's new, what's changed, or what's ready to be implemented. Way too many clicks to get to basic actions like export or inspect a color. And those are just the basics. On top of all of this, there's often a mismatch between the way designs are structured in Figma and the way they need to be built. As a result, developers rarely get what they need from Figma. To address these challenges and so many more, I'd like to introduce you to Dev Mode. A view into Figma files optimized for the needs of development. Let's go do this live demo. All right, first Figma demo, live in front of a lot of people. Wish me luck. So, here we are in dev mode. The first thing you'll notice is that it's the exact same file Dylan was working in. We don't have to worry about Dylan needing to export additional revisions. It's got all the same multiplayer goodness as Figma today. It's just a new view optimized for developers. Instead of seeing an overwhelming list of pages with every iteration over the last couple months of work, we only see the pages that have designs that have been marked as ready for development. And of course, we can still get to all those other pages if we need to, but they're collapsed by default. Additionally, we don't think developers need to see an overwhelming list of layers right off the bat. So instead, we show them the sections that have been marked as ready for development and simple thumbnails to help them get a sense of what's going on in this file. Now, many developers struggle to pan and zoom an infinite canvas when they come into Figma for the first time. If you're on a desktop, you don't necessarily know what the keyboard shortcut is. So we've made it really easy to navigate a file simply by clicking around, and it will take you to the exact part of the canvas with the right zoom level already set up. You can also quickly navigate using your arrow keys and get a lay of the land. And if I know how to use this zoom feature here, you can see exactly when every screen was last edited. If a screen actually changed since the last time I was in this file, you would also see a little yellow badge to help direct your attention to what's new. Now, this screen says it was edited an hour ago, so Dylan must have changed something. But I don't really know what he changed. I'm sure many of you have been here before, regardless of whether or not you're a designer or a developer. It's just not always obvious. And I could go ask Dylan to come back out here and show me exactly what he wanted me to do, or I can use a new feature called Compare Changes. Here it is. Compare Changes gives you a side-by-side view of a design in the current version and any previous version you might have seen. You can switch between a side-by-side view or an overlay mode to quickly get a sense for what's changed. So in this particular case, a lot changed. So we also give you a list of the layers that have been edited, added, and removed. As a developer, this is incredibly helpful for me because sometimes the changes aren't even easy to spot visually. For example, here, this world peace text changed, which is obvious. It looks like it was moved around and resized. But what wasn't obvious is that all these other properties changed that I might need to go update the code with. So this really accelerates the design to development process and eliminates a lot of tedious back and forth. And any change that happens here is easily inspectable. So you can see that this button was replaced with a new button that was added here. And if there were any layers that were removed, like this one, you can see that as well. So that's Compare Changes. Now, these are just the basics, and there's so much more we can do to bridge the gap between design and development. So let's keep going. The next thing I'd like to show you is that we've changed the default selection heuristics in dev mode so you can easily inspect individual layers without having to double-click through deeply nested groups. For example, if I want to view this icon right here, all I have to do is click it, and I've got it selected. In addition to that, we also know that oftentimes icons, if I go back to design mode real quick, consist of many different layers and paths. And time again, developers tell us that they ended up selecting an individual path and exporting that rather than the entire icon. So you'll see that in dev mode, we now have heuristics to detect this and collapse that into a single simplified layer, so you always select exactly what you need. The other thing we hear very often from developers is that the default values that design tools like Figma surface aren't really that helpful when you're writing code. For example, we all know that developers don't really use absolute positions in the top left coordinate of every single item in order to translate to the code. We need to think about responsive layouts and how things resize and reflow across different form factors and content types. So Figma now surfaces these implicit properties as well. For example, as I hover over this design, you'll see that red lines have been greatly improved to also show the padding between elements, the margin, and more. We've also introduced a new familiar diagram for anyone who's used a browser development tool before, with the box diagram over here on the right. This will show me not only the padding, spacing, and margin, but also the border radiuses, the border weights, and more. Now, many of you are working in units other than pixels. So in dev mode, you can now go over to this little setting icon here and customize the units from pixels to rems, and even set the unit scale if you're using a relative unit measurement like rems. And of course, this works for other platforms as well. We've introduced new Swift UI for iOS, and we've introduced a Jetpack Compose module too. Now, many of you are already working hard to bring your designs closer to production by investing in design systems. Design systems are often built by hybrid teams that are both building design systems in Figma and also building design systems in code to up-level the vocabulary of what we're communicating with together. And dev mode works with design systems too. So here, you'll see that with our new variables feature, if I'm using variables in my design, I can now see that in dev mode. Not just in the red lines, but also in the code that's generated as well. So here you can see that it's using the color surface subtle variable, which may or may not exist in my code. And if it doesn't, it'll fall back to a default value, and I can go create it when I port it over. We also surface components and make them really easy to select. So anytime you use a component in your design, it takes just one click to get to that component, and you're not going to accidentally select a sublayer of the component. And we give you this icon showing you the component, a description, and any properties that have been provided to that particular instance of that component. This is awesome if you're trying to rebuild a design that already has components. But if you're trying to build a component for the first time, we're also introducing a new component playground. The component playground allows you to manipulate a component well in dev mode without having to worry about editing the underlying file. So you can do this as a viewer as well. And because there's often a relationship between our design systems components and our code components, we've also made it possible for developers to associate links with any layer in a design like a component. So you can link to things like GitHub or other development tools. And if these links get added to a component, they immediately propagate to all of the instances, not just within that file, but across all the files that your company uses, so that other developers benefit from it as well. So we've talked to many of you about where you stand on the side of, I need the design tool to generate code for me, or I just want it to help me to understand the composition of a design. And many of you are in different places on that spectrum. We want to make sure that Figma works for you regardless of where you are. So for example, if you're implementing a component for the first time, we provide you with these simple code snippets. They've been revamped to be a lot better, so they generate better code that's more likely to be useful in production using modern systems like Flexbox, which reflect auto layout and even detect auto layout in places where you might not have used it. And then, of course, they also use variables, as we just talked about. But sometimes you want to go even further. For example, we hear time and time again that many of you want to update Figma to display the exact way you parameterize a React component with all the right properties in order to reflect a component instance that's been used in your design. So we're introducing a new kind of plugin to Figma called a dev mode plugin that makes it possible to do this and a much more. So I'm going to go ahead and show you one of the example plugins we've created and open sourced to help you figure out how you can customize Figma to your needs. And this is the component inspector plugin. So I'll switch over to the React code gen mode. And I will go in here and select this product card component. And you can see I have it selected here. And now you'll see, instead of just showing me some CSS or iOS styling to get started, it actually shows me exactly how I would use this instance with the right parameters in the Figma code base today. It's really, really awesome. In addition to that, we've also generated these default TypeScript definitions so that if you're going to implement this component for the first time, you'd have a sense for all the different properties and parameters you need to get started. But what if you want to go even further? Well, we have some incredible partners in our community that have been working with us throughout the beta to help do just that, like Anima and AWS Amplify Studio. So I'm going to go over here. And now I'm going to switch to Anima. And I'm personally a type fan, so I'm going to use TypeScript. We'll let that run for a second. And there you go. This is actual working code to recreate this component in a separate code base from scratch. It's really incredible. You also get the styles. And if you go to the plugin tab, you can even open a CodePen sandbox to start working with this code immediately. With plugins, it's also possible to take over the entire properties panel and bring in other developer tools inside of Figma. For example, we've been working with Atlassian to build a Jira integration for Figma so that you can start to record tasks while you're still in the design file and associate them with the individual layers in the file. So I'm going to go ahead and show how that works now. So we'll go ahead and run the Jira plugin. And you'll see that right here, I now have all of the tasks that are related to this particular page in my design file. And because they're associated with individual layers where I actually need to do the work, they'll take me to the exact portion of the canvas where the task was originally created. I can also create new tasks from here, add comments, and it will sync bidirectionally between the two tools. So I just showed you how it's possible to integrate Figma with other applications by bringing those applications into Figma. We thought it would be really cool if we could bring Figma to the applications where developers live too. So we've built a plugin for VS Code called Figma for VS Code. So with Figma for VS Code, you get this new icon here in your left panel. And when you switch over to it, you're going to have access to your recents, your shared files, your starred files. You're going to see all of the notifications related to things that are ready for development. And you're going to see a familiar canvas bringing Figma right inside of your code editor. You also have access to all of the great inspection features that I just showed you. So you can see here I can expand this properties panel, view the CSS code snippets, and the CSS box model. But we've also made it possible to do a little bit more. Now, if I want to start implementing a design, for example, we'll go back to this familiar product card example. I can start writing code, and Figma is going to automatically detect that I'm typing a layer name. It'll select that layer, autocomplete, and fill in the code for me. It's really awesome. Can we go back a slide? So in the Figma community today, you're going to find inspect panel plugins from our partners like GitHub, Atlassian, Storybook, Microsoft, Anima, Linear, and Google. I want to give a big shout out to all of our partners for working with us throughout the dev mode private beta and building a better developer experience together. Now, just to recap real quick, we're launching a new space purpose-built for developers, Dev Mode. From section status, wayfinding, compare versions, inspect panel plugins, to a brand new integration with VS Code, we hope Dev Mode is just the first step towards developers finally feeling like Figma is for them. And just to be clear, you're still going to be able to do everything you can today as a free viewer, like comment on designs, generate code, copy values, and export assets. Dev Mode builds on top of all of that and will be available to all users free for the beta for the rest of 2023. Starting in 2024, Dev Mode will be available to all editors on paid plans. Additionally, for customers on our organization and enterprise plans, you'll be able to purchase a separate license of Dev Mode at a lower price. To dive deeper into Dev Mode, check out the in-person workshop tomorrow at 2 p.m. Now, to close this keynote out, I'm going to welcome Dylan back onto the stage.
Killed it. Good job. I am so excited for Dev Mode and for everything else we talked about today. So just to let you know, because I know you're wondering, you'll get access to all these features as we roll them out across today. And they'll all be enabled right after the keynote. So check them out and give us your feedback, as always. OK, 2 more things. First, when you log into Figma next, you might notice a refreshed file browser. We've unified the experience so you can search, get notifications, and view recents across your entire account. And with new shared projects and shared files tabs, you'll be able to easily access files shared with you. Lastly, perhaps our most longest awaited feature. If you were at Config 2020, you may have remembered that we announced an updated font picker there. And today, a little over 3 years later, we're announcing it's going live. Complete with font preview. Sometimes these things just take longer than expected, you know? Before we wrap up, I want to give a special thank you to all of the beta customers who partnered with us, given us feedback, and supported our launch today. So I want to quickly see what they think of these new features.
This Figma variables feature was so highly anticipated, I actually took a break from my honeymoon to test it out.
It was like witnessing pure magic. I cannot believe I spent all these hours converting everything to dark theme manually.
There may have been some times where we handed off prototypes and they'd be like, wow, it's already built?
I used to take pride in my ability to make a good spec. I don't miss that at all because it was super annoying.
It brings our workload down. One of our engineers said, now I can finally sleep at night.
Thank you again to everyone who participated in the beta. And this is just the beginning of where we're going to go and where we're going to take our platform. And of course, we see AI enabling that as well. We've been building our ML team for a bit now, and we're exploring how AI will power our entire platform at Figma. Here are some early explorations and ideas of what might be possible. Oh, can we go back? Sorry. From suggesting variants and recommendations for your design systems, to chaining together different plugin actions, to automating variant creation, or resizing across devices, we see AI playing a central role across the Figma platform. So we're also excited to share the news that to accelerate our AI and ML work, we've acquired a company called Diagram. As many of you know, Diagram was founded by Jordan Singer, a longtime Figma community member. And honestly, Diagram's tools make design feel even more magical. So we're excited to deliver AI capabilities across Figma in partnership now with the Diagram team. And if this topic interests you, and it should, you have to tune in tomorrow. We have some amazing talks lined up, including Noah Levin, our VP of Design at Figma, He's going to be talking with the diagram team as well. And all these other incredible, amazing speakers are going to talk about AI in our keynotes tomorrow. So please join us. Don't miss it. Now to close, every all hands at Figma, I typically share some parting thoughts, and I thought I'd bring that tradition to Config today. The future of design needs all of you. It needs more thinkers and builders to come together. The future needs you to spark imagination into action. So, let's go build that future together. Thank you for joining us this morning, and please enjoy Config. Thank you all.